Hi everybody, thank you for coming today. My name is Leslie and today I'm going to be presenting to you my thesis project, Tend. So before we get into the project itself, I would like to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me. I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, and I went to UC Davis, and I graduated in 2008 with a bachelor's degree in visual communications. After graduation, I started working as a graphic designer for a small firm in Santa Cruz with companies like Cisco and Plantronics. During that time, I became interested in web design, and that's what brought me back to the Academy of Art to start my master's degree. So I'm going to go through a couple of projects that I worked on over my time here. The first one is called Hatchet, and this was done for Web New Media 606, and it's a road trip planning website specifically for California Highway 1. Users can go on, they can create itineraries, places they want to go, what they want to do, where they want to stay, and then they can save those itineraries and access them later and also share them with other users of the site. The second project is called YogaKate, and it's an online yoga pose database where users can go and research different yoga poses, create their own custom yoga workouts, and then save and share them. The third project is called Bay Area Brew Ladies, and this was done for Web New Media 617, and it's a responsive, mobile-first website for women in the Bay Area who are interested in home brewing. It's a place for them to come together, share their experiences, and also create events. And this project really taught me a few things that were helpful in my thesis. First, it taught me how to focus my design on a specific target audience, in this case being women between the ages of 21 and 35 who are interested in homebrewing and who live in the Bay Area. And it also taught me how to design for mobile screen size, which is something that I didn't have a lot of experience with before, but came in handy with my thesis. So now getting into my thesis, it's called Tend, and it's an application for patients with chronic illnesses, and it helps them manage their medication schedules and also track their symptoms and their side effects. So before we get into the functionality of the application, I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem that we're trying to solve with Tend. So 21.4% of the US population take at least 3 prescription medications, and 10.5% take at least 5 prescription medications. And with this many people taking this many medications, there are some side effects, namely 1.5 million adverse drug events that happen in the US every year. And an adverse drug event can be anything from an accidental overdose to mixing medications that shouldn't be mixed, or not taking your medication properly on time. And these adverse drug events, they cost us $3.5 billion every year. So the Institute of Medicine suggests that to alleviate this problem, patients should understand more about their medications and take more responsibility for monitoring those medications. So my mom is a patient who has dealt with several chronic health conditions over the past several years, and I've seen firsthand her struggle with trying to manage a complicated medication schedule. And one way that she's tried to become more responsible is by writing everything down manually. But there's issues with this. It's really hard to keep track of a medication schedule that's constantly changing. It's also really time-consuming to have to remember to write everything down. And also, it's really hard to keep track of your symptoms and your side effects when they're constantly changing. So through this research, I narrowed down on a specific target audience. People with chronic illnesses between the ages of 50 and 65, they're more likely to be female. They're definitely taking more than 2 medications, and a lot of them are either retired or unable to work because of their health problems. And with this target audience, I created a primary persona. Her name is Helen. She's in her mid-50s. She used to work as a bank manager, which was a job that she really loved, but several chronic health conditions that have popped up in the past couple of years have forced her to retire early. And her doctors are still trying to narrow down the specific dosage and types of medications that will help her be more functional and more active in her life. So what Helen really needs is she needs an easy way to enter in new medications and update her medications as they change. She also needs to be reminded of when it's time to take her medications. And she also needs a way to stay motivated and stay on track with her medication schedule. So there are a couple of things out on the market today that are attempting to solve this problem already. The first one that I have here is called Mango Health, and it's a smartphone application where users can manually enter in the medications that they're taking, and then it will remind them with an alarm when it's time to take the next dose. And every time they take their medication on time, they're given a certain number of points, which then can be used towards specific retailers' coupons and discounts. The other application is called Symptom Diary, and this allows users to go in and log any symptoms that they're experiencing. And then these logs are then shown in a chart, and they can share these charts with their doctor to kind of show how their symptoms have changed over time. But the problem with this is both of these are kind of two sides of the same problem, and in order to get a comprehensive look at your medication and your health, you're having to use two separate applications. And the second issue is that all of this is done manually, which if you're ill and not feeling very well, it's a little bit hard to have to manually enter everything in. So I think that there's a better solution for this, and I think that the solution is Tend. So Tend uses the combination of a smartphone application as well as a touchscreen wristband that does 5 things. Firstly, it allows you to enter in your medications automatically just by taking a photograph of your prescription label. Secondly, it reminds you when it's time to take your medications by an alarm that goes off on the band. It also prompts you to log any symptoms that you're experiencing, as well as track several biometric stats on the band itself. And then all of that data is shown in a dashboard that you can share with your doctor. And the final thing is that it rewards you for positive behaviors like taking your medications on time and tracking your symptoms. And then these points go towards a charitable donation system. So I'm going to show a short video that kind of explains the application a little bit better.
This is Helen. Helen has rheumatoid arthritis, hypothyroidism, and chronic depression. She currently takes 5 different medications, which all need to be taken on different schedules and have different side effects. Helen tries to manage her complicated schedule with a notebook, but she often forgets to take her medicine on time and has no way of tracking her symptoms and side effects. All of this confusion is only compounded by the feelings of depression, isolation, and powerlessness that are often associated with chronic illness. This is Tend. Tend is a cutting-edge medication and symptom management system that can help Helen maintain her medication schedule, track her symptoms, and motivate her along the way. It combines a smartphone application and a touchscreen wristband, which not only serves as an alarm, but also tracks Helen's symptoms and vital medical stats. With Tend, Helen can easily add new medications to her regimen just by taking a photo of her prescription label. Tend does the rest, extracting the data from the label and creating a custom schedule just for Helen. Then, TendBand gently reminds Helen when it's time to take her meds, and when she's done, helps her to log any symptoms she might be experiencing that day. Tend also motivates Helen to stay on track by rewarding her with points for positive behaviors, like taking her medication on time and logging her symptoms. When she reaches the monthly goal, a donation is made by the current corporate sponsor to the charity of the month. Making proactive steps towards managing her medications and symptoms not only benefits Helen's physical health, it motivates and empowers her through charitable giving. Tend helps Helen regulate her medications and symptoms, which ultimately helps her doctor make wiser, more informed decisions that put Helen on the road to recovery. With Tend on her wrist, Helen always has a caretaker around to guide and support her on her way to a happier, healthier life.
So now that we've gotten an idea of what 10 does, I'm going to walk you guys through the prototype that I've created and show you more details about it. So first we'll take a look at the application. So we're going to imagine that Helen has just come back from her doctor's office, and her doctor has decided to switch one of her prescription medications. She doesn't want Helen to take Prozac anymore, and she wants her to take Celexa instead. So Helen needs to go into the application and add new medication and delete the old medication. So she comes here and she sees the the home screen, and she clicks on medications, and a list of all the medications that she has been taking appears here. So in order for her to add a new one, she just taps on Add New Medication. And then this screen appears here, which is the camera function of her phone. And so she grabs her prescription label and she lines it up within the boundaries, and she takes a photo. And then Tend extracts the data from the label and enters it into this form field here. And she can look it over to make sure that everything was extracted correctly. And if so, then she can hit save. And then the new medication will be added to her list of medications that she's taking. So now we're going to imagine that it's about a month later and Helen's been taking her medication every day. So we're going to imagine that it's the next morning and Helen's band alarm goes off telling her that it's time to take her medication this morning. So this is the screen that she would see on the band. It tells her that she has 3 medications to take, the first one being 25 milligrams of Celexa. So she grabs her medicine, she takes it, and then she just taps to let the application know she's taken that dose. She taps again for the second medication and taps a third time for the third medication. Then Tend congratulates her, and it asks her to log any symptoms that she's been experiencing. So this list here is created by looking at all of the possible side effects for the combination of medications that Helen's taking and compiling a list of the top 10 most common. And then as time goes on, the symptoms that she experiences more often will rise to the top of the list, and any symptoms that she's not experiencing will kind of fall off the bottom of the list. So she's been experiencing some bloating and a little bit of body aches. She's also been experiencing some nausea, but nausea is not on this list. So she can also add a new one by tapping on Add New. And then an accordion of all possible symptoms will come up here. She can scroll down to N and then tap on nausea to add it. And then she clicks Submit, and nausea is added to her list. And she can swipe to indicate the severity of the symptom there. Then she hits Submit, and Tend congratulates her again and rewards her with 10 points for taking her medications on time and also logging her symptoms. So now we're going to fast forward about a month, and she's been taking her medications every day and also logging her symptoms, and she has another appointment with her doctor to sort of see how she's been doing on her new medication. So Helen can then come into the application and go to the dashboard and show her doctor directly how she's been doing over the last month. So her doctor can see all of her vital stats, blood oxygen, blood pressure, heart rate, things like that. And she can also go in and show her doctor the symptoms that she's been experiencing. So her doctor can see that she's been experiencing a lot of drowsiness and a lot of body aches and some nausea. And her doctor knows these are all side effects of the new medication that she's taking. And then her doctor decides to scale back the dosage slightly in order to alleviate those symptoms. So we can see through that little walkthrough that Tend makes it really easy for Helen to enter in new medications that she's taking just by taking a picture of her prescription label. It also means that she never has to remember on her own when to take her medications because the band reminds her. It's also really easy for Helen and her doctor to see how she's been doing based on the data in the dashboard. And it also motivates her by giving her points that she can then use towards a charity donation. gives her a sense of power and agency in her own life. So now that we've seen TEND in action, I want to walk through the process that I went through in creating TEND. After I did all my research, came up with my target audience and my personas, I started creating a list of tasks that I wanted the user to be able to complete in the application. And from there, started doing a series of task flows. You can see a couple of examples of that here. The task flows then allowed me to sort of flesh out a sitemap for both the application as well as the band. And then with the sitemap and the task flows together, I started creating a series of wireframes. Once the wireframes were all done, I started thinking about branding and visual design. And when I first started thinking about branding for TEND, I thought about who TEND would be if it was a person. And to me, TEND is a nurse. She's someone who's friendly and comforting and smart and reliable. And I really wanted all those brand attributes to come through in the visual design. So here is some examples of the final visual design that I came up with. I started with this green color because it's reminiscent of the color of nurses' scrubs. And then I went with a completely cool color scheme, analogous color scheme, because I felt it lent a sense of calmness and reliability to the application. And I also did like a color coding process where each section of the application is specifically one color so that patients know where they are on the application at all times. And I also did a logo. So this is the logo that I had at midpoint. And I originally went with this font because I felt like it was more handwritten, a little more casual and friendly feeling. But ultimately, it was a little bit too thin, too pointy and aggressive for the kind of calm feeling that I wanted the logo to have. So this was the final logo that I came up with. I ended up using Brie font, which is a little bit rounder, a little bit thicker and weightier. And then a pill icon with the plus in the center as a logo icon. So after the visual design was all done, I started working on a prototype. It was an HTML-based prototype. So I used HTML and CSS for all the content and styling. I used JavaScript for all the interactions. And then I used Firebase for all of my data. So Firebase is an API that allows you to house your data on their servers and then interact, update that data using client-side coding like JavaScript instead of using PHP, which was great for me because I don't have a lot of experience with PHP. And of course, throughout all of this, I did user testing. I did low-fidelity paper prototype testing during the user experience phase. I also did high-fidelity user experience testing. And then once the visual design was done, I did a high-fidelity click-through user testing, and then finally did a final round of user testing after the live prototype was created. So here's one feature, and I'd like to walk through kind of my process with refining this and iterating this through user testing. So the first, number one here, you can see this is the symptom severity input feature. And at first, I wanted the user to input the symptoms they wanted to track in the application itself, and then those symptoms would appear in the band, and they would individually indicate whether they had experienced that symptom and what the severity was. That was a little bit confusing for people to have to go back and forth between the application and the band to decide which symptoms they wanted to track. So that's sort of when I came up with the idea of creating a list for them based on the side effects of their medications and having that directly in the band itself. So removing the tracking part from the application completely. And that was okay, but so here you can see in number 2, they pick the symptoms that they've experienced, and then in the next screen, they indicate how severe those symptoms were. So to make things a little bit easier, I condensed those into one step. So it just shows them the list, and then they can slide to the letter of the alphabet, and then it would show a list. But that was a little bit confusing and very small on the band, so it was hard for people to interact with that properly. So then in the final iteration, you can see in number 4, a lot of people were having a hard time understanding what the severity meant just by the slider in number 3. So I added numbers as a way to kind of give them more context for what the severity was, and also changed it to an accordion, drop-down accordion for entering in new symptoms. So of course, with every project, there are things that you would love to be able to do that you don't have time for. So in a second phase of this project, I would love to be able to incorporate a physician's portal where doctors themselves could access their patients' data and even push real-time updates to their medication schedules to the patients through that portal. It would also be really great to have a desktop version of the application for patients that don't have smartphones. And third thing would be really great to have a version that doesn't include the biometric monitoring on the band that could be used for an Apple Watch or a similar smartwatch. So in conclusion, this project was really born out of a desire to help make patients' lives a little bit easier and a little bit less stressful. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for watching my presentation.
Different notebooks and lots of pencils and paper.
When you feel like it's clean and there's nothing extraneous.
I've grown a lot while I've been here, and I think a lot of that growth is because of the city.
You come out of the program with a lot of skills, and you can choose which area is it that you're most passionate about, that you want to work in.